To start thinking about what evidence a past civilization may have left behind, let's think about what our civilization will look like in the far future. Our species has been around for 300-ish thousand years, but has only had a major impact for the past 10-ish thousand years of the Anthropocene era. By definition, it's named as the era of our major impact. And that impact has massively accelerated in the 300-ish years post-industrial revolution. When you look at the world now, you might think that our constructions are the most telling signs of our presence once we're gone. But that won't be the case for long. We're almost certainly the first technological civilization on Earth. But what if we're not? How sure are we about it? A favorite way to estimate the abundance of life in the universe is the famous Drake equation, which figures that the number of intelligent alien civilizations in our own galaxy who might overlap with us can be estimated by multiplying a chain of factors, basically summarized as the number of habitable planets times the probability of a planet forming life, then technological life, then factoring in how long that civilization survives. We now know that there are billions of habitable planets in our galaxy, but the other parameters are still extremely difficult to guess. And that's because we only have one example of the formation of life and civilization to go off. And we have 0 examples of a technological species going extinct, although we're on track to get at least one of those. If we detect just one more instance of life or technology out there, we'll immediately be able to upgrade our guess at the probability of any given planet reaching that stage of development. But you know what would increase the probability even more? If we saw it happen twice on the same planet. There's an extremely loose piece of evidence, not even evidence, maybe just teaser, that life may have started independently twice on Earth. There's this zircon crystal found in the west of Australia that contains a tiny speck of carbon that looks like it was filtered through a living metabolism. It has the characteristic higher proportion of carbon-12 versus carbon-13 that plants breathe out. That speck of biogenic carbon was probably perfectly sealed in a zircon crystal, probably for around 4.1 billion years old, dating it to before Earth's crust was probably re-liquefied by massive asteroid bombardment that should have extinguished all life. That's a lot of probabilities. But this is crazy, given that the next earliest fossils in Australia and also in Greenland date to between 3.5 and 3.8 billion years ago, and that's after the Earth re-solidified following its pounding. If so, then abiogenesis, life arising from non-life, would have to have happened again. And that'd mean that life really does start very quickly, given the right conditions. We'd have to update our Drake equation estimate of the probability of life forming, given a suitable planet. But all this is extremely speculative, and one reason is that it's really hard to verify the origin of life is because these fossils are extremely scarce. Greenland and that bit of Western Australia are the only fragments of land still left on the surface from that time. The entirety of the rest of the crust has been subducted, pulled back into Earth's mantle by tectonic activity, not once but many times. The crust is recycled roughly every half billion years, meaning much of the early fossil record has been deleted, which makes it extraordinarily difficult to track the early rise of life. But if the geological record is so crappy, then in half a billion years, Earth's new inhabitants will have precious little evidence that we ever existed. So could we even know that we are the first technological civilization on Earth? And if we're not the first, that would also have huge implications for our Drake equation, forcing us to update both the probabilities of technological civilizations arising from life, and also our lifespan estimates for those civilizations. I know this sounds like some lizard Illuminati rubbish, but one effort to properly address an out-there proposal like this is a paper by NASA climatologist Gavin Schmidt and physicist and astronomer Adam Frank from a few years ago. They propose the Silurian hypothesis, which asks whether pre-human industrial civilizations might have existed. The name is an old-school Doctor Who reference. Let me be quite serious for a moment. I don't think such a civilization existed. Schmidt and Frank doesn't think such a civilization existed. The burden of proof of such a claim is massive and massively on the claimant, and currently there is no real evidence. The actual purpose of this video and of the Silurian hypothesis is to frame a very clear scientific question around a very speculative idea. So let's do just that. Broadly, that question would be, could a non-human industrial civilization have existed before us, even given our current lack of evidence of such? And if so, how long ago would it have had to have existed in order to be completely erased by now? And finally, what traces of such might still exist that we could now look for? The pyramids may have lasted millennia, but they won't last millions of years. All of our great cities will erode to dust, be covered up or washed away or end up as deserts, then ocean floors, then deep sedimentary layers, then mountains, then deserts again. Much will also be pulled beneath shifting tectonic plates, subducted. It'll be reforged into new rock in the mantle, its geological memory almost completely wiped before it re-emerges, if it ever does. So will any sign of these works be apparent to a far future? The recycling of the crust means that anything older than 500 million years is pretty much gone. But we do find plenty of fossilized dinosaur bones of dinosaurs that are 100s of millions of years old. So surely we'd find remnants of a civilization that's only millions of years old. But that is not necessarily the case because of the potential limited extent of the civilization, both spatially and temporally. We have, of course, obtained samples of the Earth's surface from many millions of years ago. Some of those areas are still exposed, but most we reach by digging or drilling. But here's the thing, we've accessed only a tiny fraction of a percent of the original Earth's surface from before the Quaternary period, 2.6 million years ago. And modern urban land coverage is less than 1% of Earth's surface today. So, if a civilization just like us existed a few million years ago, it's extremely unlikely that we, today, would have stumbled on their physical remnants. That includes cities and artifacts, but also fossils. The fossilization rate is so low that we've only discovered a small fraction of the species that ever existed. Remember that the dinosaurs roamed the Earth from around 240 to 65 million years ago. They've been gone for a third of the time they were around. And across those 180 million years, we have just a handful of specimens. By comparison, our 10,000 years of civilization is barely a blip in the fossil record. Our industrial era, not even a blip. We can find T-Rexes, but we can't find T-Rexes from a particular few centuries. The entire Anthropocene will be represented by a layer only several centimeters thick in kilometers of sedimentary layers, with the industrial age a proportionally tiny fraction of that, perhaps millimeters at best. Although a far future civilization probably wouldn't find our bones or artifacts, they might find and recognize this wafer-thin layer in the geological record. So friends, what do you think about this theory? Put your views in the comment section.